Wouldn't it be great if there was a program out there that rewarded your company for creating products, software, and manufacturing processes here in the US? You're in luck. The R&D tax credit has been around since the early 80s and does exactly that. The problem is that, like all tax law, it is old, long, and difficult to understand. That's why there is an entire industry of service providers that has one job: figuring out how much credit you are entitled to. So, what does it take? Years of tax knowledge, audit experience, and technical experience in the industry you are claiming the credit in. Or you could just use GOAT.tax. Here, we are all about education, arming our users with the knowledge that we've gained through our industry-leading consulting practice that's been around since 1983. That's what it means to be powered by Source Advisors. Today's demo will be your first look into that product. The main focus here is education, then how the platform works to make your life easier. So let's dive right in. First is onboarding. That means creating a user account, entering company information, and checking your eligibility for the credit. This process is relatively quick, but will probably be much faster if you have some documentation ready and open so that you can find and input the values quickly. Having a copy of your last filed tax return will probably be extremely helpful. The final part of onboarding, eligibility, is designed to take you through a quick survey to determine if you have any qualifying activities. Let's take a look at our dashboard. At the top, you can see that we just completed eligibility, and you can see by our study progress meter that we are now ready to jump into expenses. Since our test company already has identified some expenses, we can see that we are looking at about 12,000 in estimated credit being generated so far. Below, you will see each expense and revenue category laid out with a summary of the expenses identified. There's also a quick explanation of the types of expenses that go into each category, just in case you get lost. Let's go ahead and jump into our wages section to wrap up our wage input. As you can see, we have a few things going on. First, you will see our top level navigation that gives you a summary of all the expenses identified in each category, and a status showing whether the section has been started, is in progress, or has been finalized. To the far right, you will see our GOAT.bar, which shows you contextual information about the page you are on. Any questions that you may have will probably be answered here. Under our top level navigation, you will see three options for input. First is importing wages, adding employees individually, and finalizing the section. Let's see what our wage import feature looks like. As you can see, once we click, we get two options. The first is to utilize our automated payroll import system, which connects to over 20 different payroll providers, including ADP, Gusto, and Paychex. Next, we have our CSV import tool, just in case your payroll provider isn't supported yet. If you choose our automated payroll import tool, you'll be directed to a screen like this, showing you the types of permissions you will need to grant in order for our system to read your payroll data. Don't worry, nothing can be changed, and our system is secure. You can be assured that your data is safe. Next, choose your payroll provider from the list of providers that are supported. If you can't find your payroll provider on the list, don't worry, we're always working to extend support. Once you choose your payroll provider, you will then need to enter your credentials. Then, just give our connector a few minutes to process your request, and like magic, all your payroll will be pulled into our system. Adding individual employees is just as easy. Click Add Individual and just fill in the fields. A few things to keep in mind are, first, titles are not as descriptive as job role descriptions. For instance, if you are a project manager, but you do most of your company's software coding, it might be better to include that in the description, or to change your description to developer. Then you will need to input the state in which that employee spent most of their time doing their development. For instance, if your company is located in California and you have a Nevada employee that drives to work and works at your office, you would put California as the state, not Nevada, since they commute to your facility. Next, you will need to estimate each employee's R&D allocation. That is the amount of their year that they spent on development. Don't worry, the IRS doesn't require time tracking. How do I qualify R&D time? In order to determine an employee's qualified percentage of time, the first step is to analyze what business components they worked on over the year. For instance, if you're a software company that develops a SaaS platform, your business components may be individual modules of that platform. If you are a manufacturing company, your business components may be the various families of products that you design and mass produce. Let's look at an example. Employee A is a COO of a software company, and their background is aerospace engineering. The software product is a project management platform designed for aerospace manufacturing facilities. Employee A spends about 50% of their time handling day-to-day business concerns, such as scheduling shifts, sitting in a variety of non-technical meetings, and various administrative issues. The remaining 50% of their time, they are helping conceptualize the user experience, developing requirements for the platform, and participating in technical development meetings. In this scenario, we would qualify the 50% of their time they are spending on technical development and exclude the remaining 50% that was devoted to business concerns. Let's start qualifying your supply costs. Adding a supply record deploys multiple fields. First is the vendor name, then the category of supply. Here, for state, we want the state in which the supplies were utilized for the development effort. For example, if your company is located in Texas and you purchase raw materials from all over the world, you would input Texas as the state for those line items. In vendor description, you will want to provide additional information about the use and/or nature of the supply cost. For instance, if it was raw material used in prototype fabrication or a consumable supply used in the validation process. One important note is that supply costs have to be associated with physical, tangible goods. For the R&D allocation percentage, you will need to put the estimated amount of that material you utilized in development. What costs qualify? The supplies category of expenses is very specific with regards to what can and what cannot be qualified. There are 4 different types of supply expenses that qualify for the R&D tax credit. There are raw materials and consumable supplies used to produce prototypes, pilot models, first articles, and/or samples for validation. Then custom equipment and equipment components that we design, develop, and create. Let's look at what that means. At our facility, we create ballpoint pens. This year, we created a brand new ballpoint pen that is the most cutting-edge pen that we have ever created. Our first effort included development of a brand new barrel and tip. Initial prototypes were created in our lab using a 3D printing process. Then, we developed brand new equipment, tested the equipment by producing small batches of the pens and making adjustments to the process until it met our quality standards. In this scenario, the cost for the prototypes, including the raw materials and consumable materials utilized in development and testing, would qualify. In addition, the raw materials to run the initial small test batches would also qualify. Finally, since the equipment was completely created by our company, the cost of that equipment would qualify as well. One thing to note, when qualifying a piece of custom equipment as R&D equipment, it cannot also be depreciated. Computing expenses encompass the cost for all expenses relating to computing needed for development. Costs such as cloud hosting, costs related to development environments can be qualified here. If you click Add Expense, you will see fields for vendor name, vendor description, amounts paid, and R&D allocation percentage. Since expenses aren't always differentiated in accounting systems, you will be able to take a portion of each line item so that the final qualified amount will reflect the actual costs associated with development. What costs qualify? Computing expenses are a holdover from the early 80s, when companies needed to pay for computer time to do much of what we do today from our laptops. Since then, the nature of this expense category has changed to encompass a lot of costs that startups share across many industries. First, there are cloud hosting costs. Then there are costs relating to data connections, platform providing development services, code management, and even digital assets. These types of expenses can be captured within the computing expenses category. Here, we see the subcontractor screen. Like all the previous sections, we start with the vendor name. Then, regardless of where the actual vendor is located or where the invoice is sent, subcontractors should be attributed to the state where significantly all of their qualifying activity physically took place. For instance, if you hired an engineer who lived in Utah, but that engineer traveled to your facility in Nevada to do all their work, the state listed should be Nevada, as this is where the development activity occurred. These considerations focus on who is at risk for the development being performed. Agreements with subcontractors performing qualifying activity need to be structured as hourly, time and material, or cost-plus type agreements. If a contractor is performing development work for you but is being paid on a fixed fee, fixed scope model, these expenses do not qualify. The only exception to this rule is if the contractor is conducting testing for development purposes, but do not also propose solutions for any problems that might arise. What costs qualify? Generally, qualifying costs for subcontractors would include any time spent of qualified activities. Essentially, it is the exact same criteria that we saw for the wages section. If the subcontractor is performing technical planning activities, such as defining requirements, developing specifications, creating, modifying designs, coding, conducting tests, and/or developing manufacturing processes, the costs associated with those activities would qualify. How do I qualify subcontractor R&D time? In order to determine a subcontractor's qualified percentage of time, the first step is to analyze what business components they worked on over the year. For instance, if my software company has 2 SaaS platform products and my lead developer spends 40% of their time designing code and conducting code reviews for product A, and 60% of their time doing the same for product B, their overall qualified time would be 100%. Revenue is required for computing your base for the regular credit method, which is one of the 2 methods available to all taxpayers. The other method is called the Alternative Simplified Credit method. Our platform will compute both and give you the higher of the 2. When it comes to inputting revenue, depending on your entity type, you will need to pull information from various parts of your tax return. For instance, if you are a C corporation, you will need line 1C for gross receipts, line 4 for dividends, line 5 for interest, line 6 for rental income, line 7 for royalties, and line 10 for other income. The other entity types vary in their base revenue calculation requirement. Once you have entered all of your expenses and updated the revenue section of the study workspace, you will want to finalize each of these sections by clicking Finalize Section at the top right of each tab. You will be able to confirm that all sections are finalized in the section tabs, which will read Finalized at the top right corner of each box. After all the sections are finalized, the Submit Study button will light up and you will be able to transmit the study to our team. Once we have had time to review your study, we will get back to you with any revisions that are required. After everything is completed, we will release your study back to you for download. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch our product demo. We look forward to seeing you sign up for our product. Have a great day.